Welcome to my new series, Life Course Histories, the Stories That Made Me. I hope to share with you some stories and accounts from mine and other people's travels near and far and around the world. Why? Well, as my ending credits suggest, I'm curious. I love to learn new things and discover new places. I'm an explorer and adventurer at heart, I suppose, but more than that, it's people's stories and learning about the lives of others that has been changing for me. And well, who doesn't like a good story? But why am I doing this? Well, I think I should explain more before we start. Growing up, I've been obsessed with travelling and seeing the world. There are so many places in the world to see, and I've spoken a little about some of those that influenced me in my first video. But more than the places, it's been the people that have always grabbed my attention. The differences between the languages, the cultural practices, the beliefs, the different ways of doing things, and yet with so many similarities. All of these things come from inside people, but for me, the only way of understanding it was by living it, seeing it, and when there was something tasty involved, eating it. And if it was good, seconds would make all the difference. But seriously, learning about others, it can be a short-term focused activity. It could be a visit somewhere, reading a book, watching something. But my favourite way has always been listening and talking to people. And if you're living in that shared community, it gives you a further insight. I have been lucky in that growing up in a very mixed and ethnically diverse area of Derby, I didn't have to travel the world to see it. It was on my doorstep. It's not been an easy place to live, but it's definitely interesting and has never been boring. And I don't know if they're the same thing, but what I can say is that there was always something happening, and I wouldn't want to have grown up anywhere else. I love Derby and Derbyshire to bits. It's never been easy, it's not perfect, but it's my home. Growing up in an area that was labelled poor and deprived by outsiders, yet I always felt secure and happy. I didn't realise it was a problem area until others told me. I still think it's been an amazing place to live and grow up. But this has always made me question when I see things on TV, when other places are labelled dangerous, or other people are talked about in a negative way. Is that the real case? Is that the truth? What I have found is if you want to learn something, if you want to have the answer, you have to ask the question yourself. I don't think there are many places in the world where you can see Caribbean carnival marches, church band marches, Islamic parades, Punjabi harvest festivals, Chinese New Year floats, just to name a few, all in one place. But this does have an effect on you. You think it's normal, and this diversity and flair sets you a very special normal. It's a normal that I'm comfortable in, walking down the street hearing a dozen languages, past shops that selling things from Africa to Asia to the Americas, selling fruits and foods and different clothing that perhaps you wouldn't see outside their own native countries. Having all of this surrounding me for most of my life, I've always wanted to learn more. It's always made me aware that these places exist and the richness and diversity and fascinating stories that these people have to tell are there. I just had to go and listen and ask the questions. It's for this reason I've started this new series. But the story I want to start with today is one of mine. It's a story and a memory that's very precious to me, and something I think was the first time I really thought about many things. So here we go. Growing up, we had a local barber, Old Norman, that we would regularly go to. I think he must have cut our hair for most of the 80s and most of the 90s. I remember it was £2 or £2.50 for a short back and sides, and that's what I would get for years. We would walk in and have the pleasure of listening to Radio 2 while sitting on a hard bench with faded red leather. Old Norman was quite a tall, thin person. He always had a fancy waistcoat on, and smart shoes and white socks. I can picture him now with his white trimmed beard and white hair combed in a wave across his head. It was his hard hair, and it didn't matter however he moved, it would always be perfectly in place. He normally would wear a hard, stern face behind his fancy glasses, and he never really spoke to me. So much except with a nod. I always saw him as a scary man who meant business. Whilst we waited, I would try and see all the little lotions and exotic things he had on his wall, things I had never seen anywhere else. I always had questions for years, and always thought, what was a chap, and what did a stick have to do with it? Did you stick chaps together? Why would you need something that small? And it looked like a Pritt stick, like the glue that the teachers had in school, the ones that they wouldn't let us touch. I hoped one day I could be rich, so I could give him £1 to see what was inside. It had to be something interesting, as he'd already sold half of them on the board. But then counting out how many 5p flying saucers I would have to give up, I thought it was going to take a very long time. So many questions. However, the biggest question, one I always had, and I think anyone would have wanted to know had they walked into his shop, was where did he get those giant swords hanging on the wall from? To me, a little boy, they must have seemed like they were made for a giant. To a young me, Norman was strict, and he didn't mess around. If he told you to sit, you were sitting, and you were sitting still. And to be honest, I think I just wanted to stare at all the cool stuff he had around his working area. But once, and once only, I think I was the only one there, and I worked up the courage to ask him about all the things that he had lying around. Where did those bows and arrows come from? And what was that funny shaped V stick? What was a boomerang? And was he the strongest person in the world to be able to pick up and hold those swords that were bigger than me? How many lions did he have to kill to have those skins? And did he know the Queen, that she could afford all those chapping sticks? How did he make his hair wavy and so hard? Was he old? Was he Victorian? And if so, could he help me with my homework? Clearly, Norman wasn't used to being asked so many questions, and just laughed. Serious old Norman had gone crazy, and was going to chop my head off and put it next to the zebras and other animals he had on the wall. Well, some of them I actually couldn't recognise. I honestly can't remember much else, except being transported to Africa, the Middle East, to Australia. Norman had travelled a lot. He had been on lots of boats, bigger than the one in the park I could imagine, and that was huge. He had seen so many things I couldn't even imagine. How can the ground be red? Or how could mud be like powder? Or rain be warm? I wasn't confused or sceptical. I just couldn't wrap around the so many things he was telling me about. Only the following words echoed, and I remember. You have to see it yourself to believe it. I couldn't understand, as I probably just hadn't been further enough, I thought. The world was suddenly much bigger, and was even further away than Birmingham, and that took ages to get to. I heard Peter Pan's voice. To see the world must be the greatest of adventures. Wow, Norman was incredible. I don't know for how long I was there, or when he started or finished my short back and sides, but what I do know was when I walked out of there on the way home, with bits of my hair all over my face, itching down my back, the world had grown many times over. In junior school, a few weeks later, we were all doing drawings. I was in Mrs. Nolan's class, and it was the 80s, and big hair was in. There were lots of good memories I have from juniors, to the not so great time. I remember, I wondered how hard you had to press the black button in the red casing. That said, fire, press in case of emergency. I needed to know, and that was the emergency. I couldn't take not knowing. So So a little while later, I was being sent home by the head teacher, Mr. Holmes, lovely man. All my friends had betrayed me as they pointed at me as I was the reason the sirens had gone off. It wasn't so great, but I felt calmer as I knew exactly how hard you had to press for it to go off. Next time, I would know. But that drawing I clearly remember was, what do you want to be when you grow up? I had it clear for me, and it was easy. I wanted to be an adventurer. I wanted to climb all the mountains, walk across all the world and see all the things that Norman had told me about, and even more. Because he had said there was so much more to see, and so little time. How was I going to fit it all in? I have been so lucky in my time. I have seen so many places, done so many things. But doing so never gave me the satisfaction that talking to people, hearing about their lives, really getting to know someone new, and making friends, and making a connection with people gave me. It was the same satisfaction knowing exactly how hard to press that button before that fire alarm went off, but ultimately left me with even more questions and a strong desire to learn more. But during one parade, a few years later, the same which I'd seen innumerate times, something clicked. I was the centre of my world. I thought I had so many dreams, ideas and hopes, and have had some pretty interesting times, both good and bad. But each person walking past me, the hundreds of people walking past me, were exactly the same. I knew nothing about any of them. How many of them, like Norman, had fascinating stories to tell, had so many things to share and tell us? How many had gone to faraway places, trodden where few would dare to tread? Suddenly, an intense curiosity to know more. There was a button that needed to be pressed. Trouble was coming once again. I want to leave you with a poem by John Donne, No Man is an Island, from 1624. No man is an island, entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. If a clod be washed away by sea, Europe is a less, as well as if a promontory were, as well as if any manner of thy friends or of thine own were. Any man's death diminishes me, because I am involved in mankind, and therefore never sent to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. The words "no man is an island" were deeply embedded in a sermon about how human beings are connected to each other, and how important that connection is for the well-being of survival of any individual. When you hear the church bell tolling for someone who has died, don't ask who it is, Donne says. Just know that it's tolling for you too, because you are part of the same society, and the death of anyone takes a part of your own life away. Take care, ride safe, and stay curious.